Hello tipsters and tricksters, welcome back to my channel and welcome to another video about my adventures in France. If you're new to my channel, my name is Bea. I'm a vintage glamour enthusiast and musician. I make vintage beauty and style videos with a little bit of sustainability, veganism and lifestyle thrown in for good measure. So if that sounds like your jam, don't forget to click the subscribe button and the notification bell so you know when my videos come out. After my previous videos about living in France, how I moved to France on a budget, I got asked a lot of questions about what it was like to live in a new country and what some of the culture shocks were. So today I thought I would share with you 5 culture shocks when moving to France.
What have you got if you haven't got love?
One of the most surprising things about moving overseas is how much we take for granted the simplest things in our lives that we think are going to be really straightforward. When you arrive in a country where you don't speak the language and the culture is really different, you suddenly realize that things that you just automatically doing, like going to the supermarket or opening a bank account or making friends, can be really difficult in a new place, and suddenly you kind of don't feel like you know how to adult anymore. But at the same time, it's also one of the best learning curves about moving overseas. So I don't want this video to put anyone off. This is just a little bit of fun and poking fun at my experience of moving to France and also at the French culture in general, but in a light-hearted way. I obviously absolutely adore France and I adore the French language, which leads me into the fact that today's video is sponsored by Lingoda. I'm so excited to be working with Lingoda. They have been on my radar for quite a while now, so I was thrilled that they wanted to work with me, and I'm so grateful that they are supporting my content. If you're not already familiar with Lingoda, they are the #1 online language learning school with round-the-clock classes in business English, English, German, French, and Spanish with qualified teachers. Their Zoom classes are a maximum of 5 people, so you get plenty of opportunity to make the most of your lessons and actually practice speaking what you learn and get immediate feedback. But I think the best thing about Lingoda's approach to language learning is their intensive language courses, the Sprint and the Super Sprint. These encourage students to really commit to kickstarting their language learning process and go from small talk to real conversation in just 3 months. Plus, you get rewarded for your commitment. So if you sign up for the Super Sprint by June 24th, with classes starting on August 2nd, you'll get 30 classes a month for 3 months. And if you complete it within that allotted time frame, you'll get 100% cash back on your classes. Or if you can't commit to the full 30 classes a month, they also have the Sprint option, which is 15 classes a month for 3 months. And if you complete everything in that time frame, you get 50% cash back. You want to tell people about Lingoda? What do you reckon? If you are up for a challenge and the cost of quality language courses has made you hesitant in the past, this is a really great opportunity to get a bargain and genuinely commit to your language learning goals. For me, honestly, putting in a regular time commitment and actually taking the plunge and making sure that I engage in conversation in French is when I really started to see my language learning take leaps and bounds. Plus, it has enabled me to continue learning French even though I don't live in France anymore, and you're actually learning to have real conversations. I found that other apps and books that are available teach you really basic stuff like how to ask for directions. But the reality is that when you go to a new country, you have a smartphone that can give you directions and you basically never use those phrases, but you're struggling to make friends because you don't know the basics of small talk, so you can't genuinely engage with people. So Lingoda actually teaches you how to interact with people and have an actual conversation. If you're ready to commit to an intensive language learning program and speak confidently within just 3 months, you can sign up with the link down below in the description and use the code FAST50 for 20 euros off of your deposit. If you're aiming high, don't forget, if you sign up before the 24th of June, you can join the Super Sprint and get 100% cash back on completing your course. Thanks again to Lingoda for sponsoring this video. Let's get back to the regular scheduled content. What do you think? En France, c'est normal de manger plus tard qu'en Australie, en Angleterre, ou aux États-Unis. This was one of the biggest shocks for me. In Australia, generally you eat around about 6 p.m, maybe 7 o'clock if you work till 6. 7:30, 8 o'clock is starting to get pretty late unless you're at like a barbecue on a Friday night or whatever, but you would start your kind of before dinner drinks and nibbles earlier and then eat the main meal at maybe 8 o'clock. But in France, it's totally normal to eat dinner at around about 8 p.m. Some people eat as late as 9. And if you're having a dinner party, I went to many a dinner party where it got to 11, 12 or midnight and we still hadn't eaten the main yet and I had to go to bed. I remember My ex-boyfriend's family, they had guests over, and the guests arrived, I think, around 7:30, 8 p.m. We had some champagne and some nuts and chips, and then we chatted for a while, and then I think we ate some asparagus with mayonnaise on it. We chatted for a bit longer and had a bit of salad, and by that time it was 11 p.m. I had been working all day. I was absolutely exhausted, so I was like, I'm going to go to bed. Well, I'm going to have a nap at least. Like, I have to go upstairs and have a nap. And my ex-boyfriend came and woke me up at 1 a.m. was like, we're about to have the main. Do you want to come and join us? And I was like, I am out for the count. Like, I can't do this. I'm not hungry. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. So it does take a bit of time to adjust because obviously your body clock is in a certain way, and it's bizarre for you to just suddenly be having this huge gap between lunch and dinner, which, you know, they're still eating lunch at like between midday and 2 o'clock. So to then be eating dinner super, super late, for me, it's just like, I can't, I need to eat every like 3 to 4 hours. I really struggle to wait that long. But now I'm in the habit. And so I've moved back to England, and people find it weird that I'm not hungry till like 8 p.m. at night. So I've just seemed to never be in the right country for what my stomach wants. Apparently in France, the phrases "the customer is always right" or "we'll adapt to your needs" just don't exist. En fait, l'inverse est vrai. France is really famous for having a very bureaucratic system. There's a lot of paperwork. Even French people get frustrated by it. But I would have to say there is also this thing about customer service where people who work in customer service never seem happy to serve you, and they almost seem to be trying to make it harder. Like, you can literally arrive with all of the paperwork and documentation you need at the right time, and they'll tell you they can't do it, or you don't have everything you need, and then you return next time with exactly the same stuff because you haven't been able to get something, impossible thing that they've tried to ask you to get for the next meeting, and it all goes ahead just fine. So I feel like in some ways in France, it's like they say no twice and then they say yes, just because that's the way it's done. I don't know, but it's so bizarre, and the bureaucracy just drives you absolutely crazy. And the other thing that baffles me with customer service there is, like, at lunchtime, everyone in the company goes off for lunch together. In Australia, it's really common on your lunch break to like pop to the bank or decide to go and buy, I don't know, your medicine from the chemist or something. You can't do that in France on your lunch break because they're also on lunch break. They don't take it in turns. There might be 2 people working in the shop, but they go and have lunch together and they close the shop, which I just don't understand the point of having multiple people working if you're not going to take shifts and turns to cover the job. But I guess it's like a real cultural difference. And as a worker, that's actually really nice because then you get to have some social time with your colleagues, and also there's value put in taking time to rest and recuperate and enjoy your lunch and then come back to work and do a good job later on, which I think is missing a lot of the time in Australia and English culture. I'm not sure about America. I imagine it's probably similar. But so often when I've been at a restaurant or a bank or just anywhere where there's customer service, it seems to me like I'm supposed to feel privileged that they are even serving me or talking to me. It's like, but it's your job. Like, I need you to do something for me. Why are you making it so difficult? And why are you so mean? I remember at one point I had a lot of trouble getting a bank account, which is something else that I will go into. But we kept calling and emailing them like at least once a week to try and fix the problems. And the number of times that they yelled at me on the phone and told me that it was impossible to get in contact with me and that they'd been trying. And I was like, no one has ever contacted me. I've never received an email. No one has ever called me. I've been calling you. Like, I've been available to talk. I've literally spoken to someone from the bank every week for months, and I've gotten absolutely nowhere, but somehow I was in trouble. Speaking of banks, ouvrir un compte bancaire en France est un véritable cauchemar. I had a job with an English babysitting company. They actually had a deal with a local bank for all of the staff to have an account with them and to have our mail sent to them so that if we didn't have an apartment yet, all of our banking stuff would go to work and they would vouch for us. So my work set it up. I called, I told them that I was coming via Babylong, and I went to open my bank account. What I didn't know and understand was that opening a bank account in France is like having a job interview. You're not just going to get an account. They want to interview you to decide whether or not you are a desirable client. In Australia, banks are like, yes, give us your money, please, come here, take a credit card. Like, you walk in, 5 minutes later you have a bank account. They're like desperate for you to be their client. In France, they're like, we'll get back to you. So not only did I leave the first meeting at the bank not knowing if I was going to get a bank account, I had to come back for a second meeting like 10 days later. No, it was 3 weeks later. Then they told me they were going to send me my bank card and my PIN out. They sent me my bank card. I didn't receive my PIN. They were like, oh, no worries. I got in contact with them. They said they'd sent me another PIN. In the meantime, I had my money redirected to my then boyfriend's account so that I could get my paychecks. Time passes, I still haven't received my PIN code. I checked that they were sending it to my workplace, they had all the address and everything correct. It didn't come. This happened for 5 months. I was calling them every 1 to 2 weeks, asking them where my PIN number was and not receiving my PIN. Eventually we moved into my own apartment and I changed the address. They said that's absolutely fine, but they said you're gonna have to pay the fees. You've ordered a new PIN number like 10 times now. You need to pay £5 every time you lose your PIN. And I was like, no. I did not lose my PIN. You never sent me my PIN. So once we got that sorted, we organized for them to send the PIN to my new address. Now, the thing to remember about a lot of apartment buildings and even business buildings in France is that they don't have numbers assigned to apartments. All that's written on your mailbox is your name. And so because Val's last name was first, they didn't put it in there. They just left it in the door of the groundskeeper for the building. Luckily, our groundskeeper was really lovely and he actually recognized my name and he came and knocked on our door and he gave me the letter. So I got my PIN code 7 months after I moved to France. It was a freaking nightmare, and I later discovered that they'd been making the same mistake with my workplace. So they had written the address correctly, but they never wrote Babylong on there. So they were delivering it to the building, but not putting it in the post box for Babylong like they were doing for literally hundreds of other people who had bank accounts via Babylong. This is a complaint that literally everybody I have ever met who has moved to France has had to deal with. And the same goes with like French people leaving and then trying to transfer money to another country. Every time you want to send money to someone in France, even if they're in France, you can't just be like, oh, I'm going to send money to you, thanks for lunch. You need to ring or email your bank and ask them to add that person to your bank account. And then you need to wait several days for the processing to happen. Then you're allowed to send money. This next one is a really tricky one because obviously when you move to a new country, it's really important, especially if you're on like a working visa or something, to find work. And the whole process of job interviews and how you present yourself for a job in France is completely different to at least my experience for the UK and for Australia. Do not talk yourself up or try and sell yourself to someone or over-exaggerate your resume when you're at an interview. Il pourrait penser que tu es arrogant. In France, talking yourself up or like big noting yourself, which is such a big thing, I think, for America and England and Australia, is to like seem really confident and really sell your resume and like convince them that you're really the person to do this. That's so not a thing in France. If you do that, they're just gonna think that you're really up yourself. In my experience, they tend to value teamwork and humility, and they just want to hear in an interview what you've studied and what your experience is. And that's the other thing, is that translatable skills or like relevant experience is not a thing. If you didn't study in that sector and you haven't worked in that sector, you don't have what it takes to do that job. You're going to have to go away and study and start again in order to be able to move into that industry. So the idea of like being capable and following your dreams and changing direction in life and like starting anew is quite a complicated and difficult one in France, and one that I found a lot of my French friends just don't really think is realistic, and I can completely understand why, because there's a ton of hurdles in the way for them to do that. So if you are heading to a job interview in France, you can be friendly and confident, but be straightforward. You don't necessarily have to make them think that you're going to be bringing anything fantastic and new, or that you're going to be like the best leader or whatever. You just need to be able to demonstrate that you're going to be able to do the work. This last culture shock was one that I really struggled with because I moved to France not knowing basically any French. I could say like bonjour. I had basically studied a few audiobooks with really basic tourist phrases that I honestly never really used. I thought, well, you know, I'm moving to France. I'm going to be living with a French guy. I'm going to be submerged in the language all day, every day. I'll actually learn really quickly. I just have to like make myself speak French even if I'm nervous about it. The problem is, à Paris, tout le monde veut pratiquer son anglais. It is impossible to learn French in Paris because everybody wants to practice their English. As soon as they hear an accent that is American or English or Australian, they immediately like, oh, this is my chance to practice my English. And everyone would say to me like, I haven't practiced speaking English since I was in high school. It's so great to have an opportunity. And I was like, no, I'm trying to practice my French. I also had a job where I had to speak English all the time. I was working with children who were doing submersive English classes, so I was never allowed to speak French or even let them know that I could speak French. So my only opportunity was like when I went to the shops or a restaurant or like to the corner to buy bread and wine or whatever, and people would insist on speaking English to me, and it meant that I wasn't picking up vocabulary. I was only repeating things that I already knew. So that was really difficult. If you make an effort to speak French, it seems like people insist on speaking English, but if you can't speak French, they will refuse to speak English. So you can't really win. But what I would say is that if you make the effort to speak French and learn French before you go, Parisians in particular, who are quite famous for getting annoyed about tourists coming to Paris and refusing to speak any French, they're going to be really impressed that you've made the effort when so many other people don't. You're not just another tourist who's come to a foreign country expecting everyone to adjust for them. Paris is obviously a really big international city, so English is very, very common. Whereas once you move outside of Paris, the rest of France, although they learn English in high school, has no real reason to be speaking English. So it's really important for you to be able to communicate in some way. They might be willing to accommodate you in English, but they just actually can't communicate with you because they don't have the English skills. So it is definitely worth doing some courses before you go. These culture shocks aside, moving to France was still definitely one of the best things that I ever did. And I think these kind of culture shocks and learning curves when you move somewhere else and you're not familiar with the culture and with the language are really good opportunities to grow as an individual and see where your weaknesses are and what things you take for granted. It just kind of opens your mind up to how you can contribute and make an effort when you leave your home country. Making sure that you learn a bit about the culture, watching videos like this and by other people who've lived overseas so that you understand what you're getting yourself into, learning the language before you go, and I guess trying to make connections and friends and a network as well, like online Facebook groups or Instagram groups, etc., will just help make these hurdles a little less stressful and a little bit less overwhelming. I think the thing is to remember too, obviously for the fun of it, like I'm complaining because it was frustrating and stressful, but at the same time, it's just cultural difference. There's not a right or a wrong. There's plenty of things that are super annoying about Australia when people come to visit. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I know that my friends who visit are like, why is it like this in Australia? That's so silly. And for us, it's totally normal. It's the same in France. Like when we complain about the bureaucracy or we're complaining about them eating late or whatever, it's just because it's not what we're used to, you know? It doesn't make it wrong. And in fact, sometimes you find that you enjoy things more. Like I personally like eating later now. I eat more slowly. I appreciate the process of dinner. Spacing out how you eat makes you feel less full and overwhelmed. I find now when I eat dinner parties in the UK and Australia, like we drink, eat nibbles, eat the main, eat dessert, all really close together. And then I feel absolutely stuffed and really tired and uncomfortable when I go to bed. Whereas in France, because it's quite a drawn out process, you enjoy people's company more because you spend more time with them. The evening is much longer, but also each kind of part of the meal is digested in between, and we don't kind of glug through the alcohol either. It's like spaced out as well so that you're not getting quite so tipsy. So sometimes the things that you find the most annoying when you first move overseas actually end up being some of your favorite things about the culture, and you take them on board and take them home with you. So that's the video, guys. I want to say a huge thank you to Lingoda for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to check out the Sprint and the Super Sprint, link down in the description box. If you want to sign up for the Super Sprint and get 100% cash back for finishing the course, don't forget you need to sign up before June 24th. There is a code down below for you guys to get 20 euros off the deposit as well. I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know what you thought of the video and any suggestions for future videos. Come and follow me on my Instagram. Check out my Patreon. It is linked down below. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video. Bye.